I grew up in a house where looking good mattered more than being good, where smiling at church was more important than telling the truth at home. My mom, Lorraine, had this perfect act she put on for everyone. The charming Southern mom, hair curled just right, pearls, a sweet laugh that made neighbors adore her. But once the doors shut, that mask came off. She could cut you down with a single sentence, her words sharper than any slap. I learned early that emotions weren't welcome in our family. If you cried, you were dramatic. If you got scared, you were imagining things. And if you got angry, well, anger was Mom's thing, nobody else's. Still, no matter how many times she made me feel small, I could never stop seeing her as my mother. That strange, fragile loyalty never left me. So when she told me what happened a few weeks ago, her voice trembling in a way I'd never heard before, I knew something had cracked in her. Whatever armor she'd worn all her life had shattered. What she went through was real, terrifyingly real. It was a late Saturday afternoon, one of those sticky spring days when the Charleston air clings to your skin like syrup. The smell of cut grass and sea salt drifted through the open windows as she helped with the kitchen renovation, which mostly meant standing around telling Dad what he was doing wrong. "I need to grab a few things from Clayton's," she said, brushing sawdust off her blouse. Dad looked up from the cabinet hinges, sweat dripping down his temple. "Don't take forever, Lorraine. We're trying to finish this today." She gave him that sharp little smirk. "Relax, Greg. I'll be back before you're done swearing at those hinges." I laughed from the table, half listening to their usual banter. It felt normal, safe. I didn't realize that was the last normal moment of the day. Mom took her old silver Honda and parked near the far end of the lot, only space open close to the garden section. She hated parking out there, said it made her feel like bait. Still, she locked the doors, grabbed her canvas tote, and started the long walk toward the entrance. Then came the sound of footsteps behind her. Slow, too close. At first, she brushed it off. Probably someone in a hurry, but the rhythm of those steps matched hers, half a beat behind. That tight, coiling feeling started in her stomach, the one you get before your brain catches up to danger. She pushed through the automatic doors into the blessed cool of the air conditioning, the faint smell of sawdust and fertilizer filling her nose. She walked toward the tool aisle, pretending to focus, but she could still feel eyes on her. "Ma'am, can I help you find something?" A young guy in a green apron asked with a friendly smile. "Oh, I'm fine, she replied, forcing a polite tone, her eyes flicking sideways. That's when she saw him. A man, maybe mid-50s. Scruffy gray beard, greasy hair sticking out from under a faded ball cap. His plaid shirt was stained and stiff, jeans caked with dirt. But it wasn't the clothes, it was his expression, wide-eyed, hungry, too focused. Later, Mom said, it wasn't that he looked homeless. It was the way he looked at me, like I wasn't a person, just something he wanted. She turned down an aisle of drill bits, pretending to browse. From the corner of her eye, she saw him pause at the end of the row, standing perfectly still, just watching. Her throat tightened. "All right, Lorraine," she muttered under her breath. "Don't lose it." "You're fine." She decided to test him. Walked 2 aisles over into paint supplies, pretended to study sandpaper. Within a minute, there he was again. Same distance, same stare. Her pulse started to hammer. She moved faster, weaving through aisles, doubling back twice. Every time she looked, he was there like a shadow that refused to disappear. Finally, she whispered, "Nope, I'm not doing this." She headed straight for the service counter, heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Excuse me," she said quickly to the young clerk, a red-headed girl barely out of high school. "There's a man who's been following me around the store. He's over there." But when she turned to point, he was gone. Just gone. The girl frowned, her voice uncertain. "Do you want me to call a manager? We can keep an eye out?" Mom sighed, heat flooding her face. "No, it's fine," she said, though her hands were trembling. "Maybe I'm just overreacting." But she wasn't. "Maybe I'm overreacting," Mom said softly, her voice trembling. "But yes, please, just have someone keep an eye out." The red-headed girl gave her a reassuring smile. "Of course, ma'am. You're not overreacting at all." Mom forced a tight smile and thanked her. She lingered in the store for another 15 minutes, pretending to browse the aisles, scrolling her phone just to look busy, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds, but nothing. The man was nowhere to be seen. By the time she checked out, she'd almost convinced herself she'd imagined it. Maybe he'd just been wandering. Maybe she'd misread the whole thing. But as the automatic doors whooshed open and the heavy evening heat wrapped around her, that same sick feeling punched back through her gut. She'd barely taken 10 steps into the parking lot when her instincts screamed. Mom turned her head slightly, and there he was. The same man. He stood near the sidewalk, pretending to look at a row of barbecue grills on display. Only he wasn't looking at them. His eyes were locked on her. Her pulse spiked. Her grip tightened around her keys until the metal dug into her palm. She had at least 200 yards to her car, parked all the way out by the garden section. She started walking faster. So did he. Every time she picked up her pace, his footsteps mirrored hers. Every time she slowed, he slowed. The sound of his shoes scraping the pavement echoed behind her, never too close, but close enough to make her skin crawl. Jesus, help me, she whispered, barely audible over the buzz of the streetlights. By the time she reached the halfway mark, she swore she could hear him breathing. Her heart pounded so hard it made her vision pulse. Should she scream, run?
Spin around and fight with her keys like a weapon?
Her hand shook as she weighed the choices, panic building like static in her chest. Then, headlights. A white pickup turned down her row, its beams sweeping over the lot. Without thinking, Mom threw both arms in the air and waved. Hey! The truck slowed. The driver, a middle-aged man with sunburned cheeks and sunglasses perched on his head, rolled down his window. Ma'am, you all right? The man behind her froze. For the first time, his expression shifted, caught, cornered. Then he turned sharply on his heel and walked off fast, vanishing between 2 rows of cars. Mom almost collapsed from the rush of relief. She hurried toward the pickup, chest heaving. Thank God. That man, he was following me. He was right behind me. The driver looked past her, eyes narrowing. Yes, I saw him. He was way too close. You did the right thing, flagging me down. Her breath came in short gasps. He was going to grab me. I could feel it. The driver's voice dropped. Ma'am, you don't know how lucky you are. There was a woman snatched from this same area last month. They still haven't found her. Mom's stomach plummeted. Oh my God. Go ahead and get in your car, he urged gently. I'll wait right here till you're gone. She nodded quickly, eyes glassy. Tears stung but refused to fall. She shoved the cart aside, unlocked her Honda with trembling fingers, and climbed in. The second the door shut, she hit the lock button. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The keys slipped twice before she finally started the engine. She pulled out fast, her chest tight, heart still hammering against her ribs. When she got home, Dad was still in the kitchen, swearing under his breath at the cabinet doors. You were gone forever, he muttered without looking up. Mom stood in the doorway, pale and trembling. Greg, she said hoarsely. I almost didn't come back. He glanced up, confused.
What are you talking about?
Her voice cracked. Some man followed me, all through the store out into the parking lot. He was right on me. If that truck hadn't pulled up, Dad's screwdriver hit the floor with a metallic clatter. For once he didn't argue, didn't scoff. He just stepped forward, took her by the shoulders, and pulled her into his arms. I'd been standing in the hallway, frozen, listening to every word. And for the first time in my life, I heard my mother cry. Not her usual angry, manipulative tears, but raw, broken sobs that shook her whole body. Since that night, Mom won't shop alone. If Dad can't go, she doesn't go. She still talks about it sometimes, the sound of his footsteps matching hers, the way he stayed close enough to blend in but near enough to strike. She's still Mom, still sharp-tongued, still controlling, still impossible sometimes, but I can see it now, that shadow sitting just behind her eyes. And I can't help but think, if that truck had been 5 seconds later, if the driver hadn't looked up, if Mom hadn't waved her arms, I might be telling this story very differently. Because sometimes evil doesn't wear a mask. Sometimes it's just a man in a dirty shirt waiting for the right moment. And sometimes the only thing between life and death is whether a stranger decides to slow their truck. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to tell this story. When people talk about childhood horror, They usually mean nightmares from scary movies or shadows in their closet that turned out to be coats and toys. But mine was different. Mine wasn't about monsters or ghosts or anything that could be exorcised. Mine was about my mother. Her name was Lorraine Hall, though most people around town just called her Lori. If you asked the neighbors, they'd tell you she was a hard-working single mom just trying to make ends meet. And sure, that's how it looked from the outside. Hair always pinned tight, lipstick precise, uniform crisp from the diner, heels clicking sharp on the pavement. She looked like a woman who had everything under control, but behind closed doors she was someone else entirely. Someone mean. Someone who knew exactly how to wound you with words, where to cut so deep you'd still bleed days later. I was 9 the day it happened, the day I thought she was going to die right in front of me. But to understand why that day is carved into my memory, you need to know what life with her was really like. Lorraine wasn't the kind of mom who tucked you in at night or asked how school went. She was the kind who'd yank the blanket off your bed at 5 in the morning and bark, "Get your lazy ass up. The world doesn't wait for nobody." She was the kind who'd critique how you held a fork, how you walked, how you breathed in her direction. "Don't slouch. You look weak. Speak up, for God's sake. People think you're slow. Quit crying. Tears don't pay bills." That was her rhythm. Sharp words, sharper looks. My dad wasn't around. He'd left when I was too young to remember his face. From what I gathered, he and Lorraine fought constantly, loud enough for the neighbors to call the cops once or twice. Then one night, he just didn't come back. I tried asking about him when I was little. Once I said, "Did Dad?" And that was as far as I got before her hand slammed against the counter. "Don't you dare bring him up in this house," she snapped. "He's a ghost. Dead to us, and that was that. It was just me and her." And sometimes that was the scariest thing of all. The day it happened started like any other. A Saturday in mid-May, the air already sticky by 9 a.m. The kind of morning that made everything feel slightly off. Lorraine's voice woke me before I even opened my eyes. "Jesus Christ, Tyler. Do I have to do every goddamn thing in this house? You can't even remember to switch the clothes to the dryer? What are you, useless?" I rubbed the sleep from my eyes, my throat dry. I forgot last night. "I'm sorry." "Sorry don't put clean pants on your ass," she shot back, slamming the washer lid with a metallic clang that made me flinch. "Hurry up. I gotta get cash before we hit the strip." By the strip, she meant the stretch of discount stores out on Briarwood Avenue. Her idea of a weekend outing. Half shopping trip, half scavenger hunt for bargains. And as always, I had to tag along whether I wanted to or not. We drove in her old Pontiac, the windows cracked because the AC hadn't worked in years. The seats were hot and cracked, and every bump in the road rattled through my spine. Lorraine had one hand on the wheel, the other fishing through her purse for a pack of Newports. She lit one with a practiced flick, and the smoke filled the car instantly, stinging my eyes. "You think money grows on trees?" she muttered, voice rough around the cigarette. "I bust my ass all week and you act like the world owes you candy and toys." "I didn't ask for toys," I said, barely above a whisper. She shot me a look, cold and razor sharp. "What's that?" "Nothing," I muttered, staring out the window, watching the world blur by through a haze of cigarette smoke and heat. "Better be nothing," she said, exhaling a sharp stream of smoke that hit me right in the face. Her tone made it clear she wasn't inviting conversation. That was her style. Turn every small moment into a lecture, every silence into a warning. I swallowed whatever I was about to say and stared out the window instead. The rest of the drive was quiet, except for the sound of the engine groaning under the heat and the low rasp of her cigarette. We stopped at the First National Bank ATM before heading to the stores. It was one of those old standalone kiosks, just a squat concrete box with a single security camera bolted above it, the kind that buzzed faintly when you got too close. Lorraine parked right up front, killed the engine, and stepped out. "Stay close," she ordered, slinging her purse over her shoulder. I followed, the asphalt radiating warmth through the soles of my sneakers. The sun beat down so hard it made the air shimmer. Lorraine muttered curses under her breath as she jabbed her card into the machine, the beeps echoing too loud in the stillness. I kicked at the ground, tracing shapes in the dust half tuned out, until something at the edge of my vision caught my eye. Just beyond her, where the bank wall turned a sharp corner, I saw it. A face. A man's face. He was peeking around the corner, eyes wide and locked straight on my mother. They were wrong somehow, too focused, too bright, too hungry. My whole body went rigid. Before I could even process it, he slipped back out of sight. Gone. Mom, I whispered. Not now. Tyler, I'm busy. Her voice was clipped, impatient. No, Mom, I said not now. She snapped, not even glancing up. I bit my lip hard, staring back at the corner. The spot was empty. For a second, I thought maybe I'd imagined it, that the heat and glare had tricked my eyes. Maybe I was just daydreaming again. But then, he was there. The same face. The same wide, unblinking stare. My heart jumped into my throat. Mom, I'm serious. There's a man... She let out a long, angry sigh, stuffing her wallet back into her purse. Christ almighty, what now? You're always making up stories. She turned to glare at me, just in time to see him step into full view. He wasn't a shadow. He wasn't a trick of the light. He was real. Tall, broad-shouldered, a dirty gray hoodie pulled tight around his face. His jaw was covered in uneven stubble, skin slick with sweat and grime, and he was coming straight for us. For a heartbeat, Lorraine froze. I saw fear, real fear, flash in her eyes like lightning. Then his arm came up fast, a blur, and the sound that followed was sickening. A thwack that cracked through the air and bounced off the concrete walls. Her head snapped sideways. She collapsed before I could even scream, her purse slipping from her fingers and spilling across the pavement. Mom! I yelled, dropping to my knees beside her. Blood ran from her mouth in a thin, bright line, pooling against the white of her blouse. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused. Before I could reach for her, a shadow fell over me. The man grabbed me by the collar, hauling me off my knees until we were face to face. His breath stank of cigarettes and something sour, almost chemical. His eyes were wild and empty all at once. Shut the fuck up, he roared, spittle hitting my cheek. I froze. Tears burned down my face, but I couldn't make a sound. My whole body trembled like I was made of glass. He dropped me as suddenly as he'd grabbed me, snatched my mother's purse from the ground and walked away. Walked, not ran like he'd just finished paying for gas. I scrambled back to her side, my hands shaking so bad I could barely touch her. Mom, wake up! Her chest rose and fell in these horrible, ragged gasps that sounded almost like snoring, except deeper, broken. I pressed my hands to her shoulders. Please, somebody help. My voice cracked, echoing down the empty street. What happened next blurred together. The sharp click of heels, a woman's voice, soft but urgent. It's okay, honey, she's breathing. A man shouting into a phone. Sirens somewhere far off. The smell of burnt rubber as cars pulled up. Strangers swarmed around us, their voices bleeding together until it all sounded like wind. All I could see was my mother's face, pale and slack against the pavement. She survived, somehow. By that evening, she was home again, jaw swollen, a few stitches across her lip. She never spoke about it. Not that night, not ever. But I never forgot the look in her eyes before he hit her. That flicker of something raw and human. Fear. Because for once, Lorraine Hall wasn't the one in control. And even though she lived, that sound, the dull thud of her body hitting the pavement, stayed with me. Some kids grow up haunted by monsters under their beds. I grew up haunted by the sound of my mother falling. I used to think the smell of rain on asphalt meant home. Back then, when I was little, it was the scent of comfort, of Mom in one of her good moods. She'd hum along to the radio, the windows rolled down, her long brown hair snapping in the wind as we cruised those empty Michigan back roads. She'd glance over and say, "See, Ben? The Lord's washing the world clean again." Funny how those same words rattle in my skull now, how something so gentle could turn into something that still makes my stomach twist. My name's Benjamin Price, just Ben mostly. I grew up in Hollow Creek, a quiet, blink-and-you-miss-it town outside Traverse City, Michigan. My mom was Eleanor Price. If you'd met her back then, you'd have sworn she was the very picture of a good Christian woman. That smile of hers, soft, patient, made strangers open up to her in grocery aisles. She baked pies for neighbors, sang alto in the church choir, and always smelled faintly of vanilla and lavender lotion. But no one knew what lived under that smile. I sure didn't, not until much later. When I was 9, my dad left. He was quiet, gentle even, but something in him broke. One night I heard shouting in the kitchen. I cracked open my door and saw him sitting at the table, his head in his hands while Mom stood over him, trembling with rage. She hurled a coffee mug that shattered against the wall. "You need help, Ellie," he whispered. "You're scaring him." Then he was gone. She stood there afterward, chest heaving, eyes wild, before turning toward me. "Your father doesn't believe in God anymore," she said flatly. "That's why he's gone. We'll be fine without him." I believed her. For years I believed her. After he left, church filled every empty space in her life. She read scripture out loud for hours, pacing barefoot through the living room. At first I thought she was just lonely. Then the prayers started changing. She'd stand over me while I slept, hands shaking, whispering, "The devil hides in innocence, Benny. We must stay pure. We mustn't let him in." I'd open my eyes and she'd still be there, eyes wide, mouth moving soundlessly. Sometimes she'd be crying, other times smiling. I never knew which scared me more. By the time I was 16, things had curdled completely. She quit her job, stopped leaving the house except for Sunday service. "The world's infected," she'd say. "It's crawling with filth." She talked about purity, sin, cleansing. If I stayed up too late watching TV, she'd yank the plug out of the wall and hiss, "Those pictures, that's how he gets in." If I forgot to say grace, she'd make me kneel on the kitchen floor until my knees ached. The worst was the night she caught me talking to a girl from school. She ripped the phone cord from the wall and shouted, "Do you want to end up like your father, chasing flesh while your soul rots?" But it wasn't all bad, not always. Some mornings she'd make pancakes shaped like smiley faces, kiss my forehead, hum while folding laundry. On those days I almost believed the darkness had passed. It never did. It always came back like something chewing its way out from inside her. After high school I left Hollow Creek and never looked back. I got into a small community college in Ohio. The first night in my dorm I lay in bed listening to silence. No footsteps pacing, no whispered prayers. Just quiet. I cried. Not because I missed her, but because I realized how afraid I'd been my whole life. At first, I called her once a week. She'd ask if I was praying, if the people I met were pure. Her voice cracked when I told her I'd made friends. "Be careful who you let near your spirit, Ben," she'd say. "Evil hides behind smiles." After a few months, I stopped calling. I told myself it was because I was busy with classes, but really, hearing her voice made my stomach knot. 3 years later, the phone rang again. A number I didn't know. "Mr. Price?" a man said. "This is Officer Randall with Hollow Creek PD. It's about your mother." My chest went ice cold. "She's okay," he added quickly. "But she's been hospitalized. She was found barefoot on Route 12 around 2 a.m., said she was walking toward the light." I didn't pack. I just drove, 6 straight hours back to Hollow Creek, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. When I reached the hospital, she was sitting upright in bed, hair matted, eyes sunken. And for a moment, I couldn't tell if the woman staring back at me was really my mother. She looked smaller somehow, fragile, like she'd been folded in on herself. "Benny," she whispered when she saw me. Her voice still carried that strange, trembling warmth that pulled at something deep in me. "Hey, Mom," I murmured, stepping forward. I hugged her, but her body was stiff, her arms hovering in that uncertain half-embrace of someone who'd forgotten how affection worked. "I was walking to him," she said suddenly, her eyes lifting past me toward the ceiling. "He told me it's time to cleanse again." I heard him clear as day. I swallowed hard. "Mom, you scared everyone. You can't just—" "He said they're coming for you." She cut me off, her voice low but sharp. "You don't see it yet, but I do. You're not safe out there." A doctor came in, a tired man with kind eyes and a clipboard tucked against his chest. He told me she was suffering from severe psychosis brought on by untreated depression and religious delusions. He talked about long-term psychiatric care, maybe inpatient therapy. I nodded numbly. When I relayed that to Mom, she started to cry, tears sliding down her cheeks as she whispered, "You'd put your own mother in a cage?" I didn't have an answer for that. After her release, I stayed in Hollow Creek for a while. I found work at a small auto shop on Main Street. Mom seemed better for a time. She took her meds, smiled more, even started cooking again. I let myself believe she was healing, that maybe the worst had passed. Then one afternoon, I found her journal lying open on the kitchen table. Her handwriting was neat, careful. Most pages were prayers, pleas for light and purity. But the last entry stopped me cold. Benjamin is changing. I see it in his eyes. He's been touched by the world, by sin. I have to save him before it's too late. Before he takes him too. My throat tightened. That night when I confronted her, she just looked at me with eerie calm and said, "You'll understand soon, when the trumpet sounds." Weeks passed. She drifted away again. Neighbors began whispering about hearing her outside at night, singing hymns barefoot in the dark. One morning I woke up to the smell of smoke and ran out back. The yard was covered in charred Bible pages, black ash clinging to the wet grass. "Mom," I shouted. "What the hell is this?" She was crouched in the dirt, soot on her hands, eyes glassy. "I had to burn the lies," she said. They changed his words. The real ones are still in my head. That's when I called Pastor Miller, the man who'd known her since I was a kid. He came that evening, voice gentle, Bible in hand. He prayed with her, tried to reason, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. "You don't hear him anymore either," she said softly. "You've gone deaf to his truth." I saw something flicker in the pastor's eyes then, fear maybe, before he excused himself and left. The night everything broke started like any other. Rain tapped at the windows, the fridge hummed, the faint smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air. I'd just come home from work when I saw her standing in the kitchen, staring into the sink. The faucet was running, water spilling over the edge. "Mom," I said carefully. She turned to me slowly. Those warm brown eyes I'd grown up with looked hollow, bottomless. "I filled it," she whispered. "Like he asked me to." "What are you talking about?" "The water," she said, smiling faintly. "It washes away. He said we'll be clean again." My stomach twisted. "Mom, stop, please." But she didn't. She drifted past me, muttering prayers under her breath. I followed her into the living room and froze. Every photo of me, baby pictures, birthdays, graduation, was spread across the coffee table, each one slashed through with a knife. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted. She looked up, tears streaking her face. "Because I love you, Benny. Because I can't let the devil keep you." "Mom, listen to me," I said, grabbing her shoulders. "You're sick. You need help." Her hand whipped across my face, the slap echoing through the room. For a moment, everything went still except for the ticking clock. "I won't let him have you," she said through clenched teeth. "I won't let him take what's mine." Then she bolted for the kitchen. I chased after her, but by the time I got there, she had already filled the tub. Steam rose, clouding the air. She turned to me, eyes wild. "Don't fight it," she whispered. "He'll make it quick." She grabbed my arm, trying to pull me toward the tub. Panic took over. I shoved her away, harder than I meant to. Her head struck the counter with a sickening crack. She crumpled to the floor, blood spilling down her temple. I froze. The only sound was the steady rush of running water. "Mom," I whispered, dropping to my knees. She blinked up at me, her voice faint. "You can't stop him." Then her eyes rolled back. I called 911, my fingers trembling so violently I could barely hit the buttons. When the paramedics arrived, I was still sitting on the kitchen floor, soaked, shaking. My hands slick with her blood. She survived, but barely. The doctor said there was brain swelling, permanent damage. She was declared legally incompetent and transferred to a psychiatric hospital in Lansing. I visited her twice. The first time, she didn't even know who I was. Just sat humming, eyes darting around like she was tracking something invisible. The second time, she looked straight at me and smiled. "You did it, Benny," she said softly. "You kept us pure." That was the last time I saw her. It's been 6 years now. I live in Detroit, work as a mechanic. I've got a wife and a little girl. We don't talk about my mother much. My wife only knows the short version, that she was sick, that I did what I could. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and my daughter's asleep, I'll hear it, the faint sound of running water. I'll go into the bathroom and find the faucet dripping, though I swear I turned it off. And once, just once, I heard humming outside my daughter's room. That same hymn Mom used to sing when it rained. I told myself it was nothing, imagination. But when I looked out the window, the street was empty. Just the soft patter of rain on asphalt. And still, somehow it smelled like home. I never thought becoming a mother for the second time would shake me like that. I was 31 when I found out I was pregnant again. Ryan nearly cried when I told him. Our daughter Laya had just turned 5 and was over the moon, hugging my belly, pressing her ear to it, whispering things like, "Can he hear me yet? And I can teach him how to be nice." We lived in a small 2-bedroom house on the outskirts of Eugene, Oregon. Old, a little drafty, but warm in the ways that mattered. The kind of place that creaked at night but smelled like cedar after rain. Our cat Mittens, a scruffy gray rescue, had been with us since before Laya was born. She adored him, slept with him, fed him treats when she thought we weren't watching, even tried to dress him in her doll's clothes. Mittens tolerated it barely. But about a week before my due date, he started acting strange. Hiding under the bed, refusing food, making that deep broken sound that animals make when something inside them is giving up. The vet said it was an advanced internal infection, nothing they could do. I remember holding Laya at the clinic while Ryan did what had to be done. She didn't cry until she saw me cry. That night she slept in our bed, her small hand clutching my arm. "Mommy," she whispered into the dark. "Yeah, baby. He's not gonna wake up anymore, right?" "No, sweetie." Then, "Where did he go?" I told her I didn't know for sure, but maybe somewhere warm, somewhere cats could nap forever. The next morning she seemed okay. Kids bounce back faster than we expect. Over breakfast she said, "It's okay, Mommy. When the baby comes we can get a new kitty. One that likes pink ribbons." Ryan chuckled, relieved. "We'll get one as soon as things calm down, promise." She nodded, satisfied. That's how life goes with kids. Grief one day, pancakes and giggles the next. A week later, our son, Eli, was born. The labor was quick, messy, emotional. Ryan was right there, squeezing my hand through every scream. Laya stayed with my sister during it all. When she finally came to the hospital to meet her baby brother, she looked serious, too serious. She peered down at the bundle in my arms and said softly, "He's really small." "Yeah." Ryan smiled. "He's still getting used to the world." She tilted her head. "He doesn't look ready." We laughed, but I remember the way she said it, not in a teasing way. It sounded like observation. The kind of quiet truth kids sometimes stumble into, too old for their age. We brought Eli home 2 days later. Those first few weeks blurred together. Sleepless nights, baby cries, endless loads of laundry. Laya adjusted fast, though. She'd bring me diapers, sing lullabies, even shush me if I walked too loudly while he was sleeping. Then one afternoon, while I was nursing him in the living room, she came up to me, that same steady, matter-of-fact tone in her voice. "Mommy?" she asked. Is Charlie going to die like Mittens did?" It threw me so hard I laughed, thinking she'd mixed up names. "Sweetheart, who's Charlie?" She pointed at Eli. "Your brother's name is Eli, baby." She frowned. "No, I call him Charlie. That's his name." "Where he came from." I froze. "Where he came from?" She shrugged. "Before he came here. You know, before you brought him home." I tried to brush it off. Told her gently that his name was Eli and that yes, everyone dies someday, but not for a very, very long time. Her eyes lit up like I'd said something wonderful. "Good," she said, smiling. "Then I can keep him longer this time." I didn't know what to say. I chalked it up to grief, confusion, kids blending things together in their heads. But that night, while rocking Eli back to sleep, her words replayed over and over. "Keep him longer this time." The next few months passed without much weirdness. I was exhausted, postpartum hormones, no sleep, 2 kids. But Laya still adored Eli, always wanting to feed him, tickle his feet, sit beside him while he napped. And for a while, everything felt almost normal. Then one morning, when Eli was about 6 months old, I woke to the sound of him laughing in his crib. That soft, bubbling giggle that always made my chest ache with love. I smiled until I heard Laya's voice too. I peeked through the cracked door and froze. She was standing over him, whispering something I couldn't make out. Her tone was low, rhythmic, like she was humming a lullaby in another language. "What are you saying, honey?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. She looked up, her expression calm. "I'm talking to Charlie." There it was again, that name. "His name's Eli," I said, forcing a smile as I lifted him from the crib. She just smiled back. "He doesn't mind." After that, she stopped calling him Eli altogether. To her, he was Charlie. She'd even correct us when we slipped. One night, Ryan laughed about it. Maybe Charlie was her imaginary friend, he said. Now she thinks he's the baby. I laughed too, but not really. Something about it didn't feel like pretend. Years passed. When Eli turned 6, the weirdness came back. He was a bright, sweet kid, but quiet. He'd sit for hours in his room drawing. Dark scribbles. Circles within circles. Patterns that made no sense but felt deliberate. Laia was 11 by then. They were close, but sometimes I caught her whispering to him, in that same hushed tone I'd heard years before. One evening, while I was folding laundry, Eli came and sat beside me. "Mom," he said softly, "can you see things through the black circles in my eyes?" I smiled faintly, thinking it was another one of his odd questions. "No, honey, I can't see through your pupils." He looked unsatisfied. "But you can see what I see, right? Like in my head." I stopped folding. "What do you mean?" He tilted his head. "You said when I was a baby you always knew when I was crying. You said you could feel it. So I thought maybe you can still feel what's inside me." A chill moved through me. "No, sweetheart," I said carefully. "I can't see inside your head. Only you can." He frowned as if that was the wrong answer. "Then how do you know what he wants?" "Who?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just smiled faintly and said, "Never mind," before walking off to his room. That night I found Laia sitting on the floor outside his door, her knees drawn up to her chest. "What's wrong?" I asked. She looked pale. "He's talking to Charlie again." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean again?" She stared at the carpet. "He says Charlie lives behind his eyes. When he sleeps, Charlie gets to look out." My chest went tight. "Laia, who is Charlie?" Tears welled in her eyes. "He's the baby I had before Eli came. He didn't make it. He was mine first." My throat closed. "What are you talking about?" She just cried harder, shaking. "I don't want Charlie to come back. He's different now." Ryan brushed it off, said it was imagination, grief, too many ghost stories. But the next few weeks made that impossible to believe. One night at dinner, Eli looked across the table at Laia and said, "Charlie says you shouldn't have told." Her fork slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. Another time, I caught him standing in front of the hallway mirror, whispering, "I can see you now." After that, he refused to sleep unless his door was open. Every night, Laia dragged her blanket into the hallway and slept right outside his room. Like she was guarding it, I finally took him to a child psychologist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Harmon. She said his questions about seeing through eyes were normal signs of a developing self-identity. I wanted to believe her, but then came the night I'll never forget. I woke to a soft tapping sound. It was coming from the baby monitor we still used for nightmares. Only this time it wasn't transmitting sound from Eli's room. It was static, broken by faint whispers. I turned up the volume. A boy's voice, thin and hollow. She told, "Now I can look." My blood went cold. I ran to Eli's room. The nightlight was on. Eli was sitting upright in bed, eyes open, and completely black. No whites, just darkness. Laia stood in the doorway, trembling. "Mom," she choked out, "it's not him." I rushed forward, grabbed Eli's shoulders, shaking him. "Eli, wake up!" He blinked, and just like that, the blackness vanished. His eyes were normal again. He burst into tears, terrified, asking what was wrong. Laia was inconsolable for days. She wouldn't go near him. She said she could still see Charlie sometimes, looking through his eyes. A few months later, we moved, hoping a new start might help. For a while it did. But even now, years later, Eli still says things that make my skin crawl. Last week, out of nowhere, he asked, "Mom, when I sleep, do you see what I see?" I told him, "No." He smiled softly, the same way Laia did all those years ago, and said, "Good. Then you won't have to see him." That night, I dreamed of a gray cat curled beside a crib. Its eyes were gone, just two black circles staring up at me. And from the crib, a small voice whispered, "You can keep me longer this time." I never thought being a mom would change me in the ways it did. Everyone tells you it's the most beautiful thing you'll ever experience, and they're right. But nobody warns you about the fear that comes with that love. It's like the more you love them, the more you realize how fragile everything is. Before I became a mother, I was calm, logical. I worked as a nurse in Des Moines, Iowa. Night shifts, doubles, you name it. Nothing rattled me. I'd seen blood, death, kids in the ER with injuries that broke my heart, but I could always compartmentalize it. Then I had my sons. Jack was 4 when this started. His little brother, Eli, was 2. Their dad, Ben, worked construction, gone most of the day, sometimes out of town for jobs, so most of the parenting fell to me. I didn't mind. I loved being home with them. Our days were filled with peanut butter sandwiches, toy trucks, and sticky little hands grabbing my cheeks for kisses. It was chaotic and sweet. But I remember the first time that other feeling hit me, the one I still can't name. It wasn't just fear. It was like standing on the edge of something dark and bottomless. It started one Sunday afternoon. The boys had a pet goldfish named Sunny. I'd bought it at Walmart because Jack begged for something alive. It'll teach him responsibility, I'd told Ben. I didn't expect it to live long, but somehow Sunny made it 6 months, a record, I thought. That day, while I was folding laundry in the living room, I heard Jack shout from the kitchen, "Mom, Sunny's not moving." I hurried over. The little orange body floated belly up in the tank, the sunlight catching on its scales. Eli stood beside his brother, clutching a cracker, staring like he was trying to make sense of it. I sighed. "Yeah, honey," I said softly. "I think Sunny's gone." Jack looked up at me, blue eyes wide. "Gone where?" I knelt beside him. "Well, baby, sometimes pets die. Their bodies stop working and they go to sleep forever." He blinked a few times. "Like people?" I hesitated. "Yeah, like people. Everyone dies someday." He just stared at me, quiet, then asked in a whisper, "Even you?" That question, God, it hit me harder than it should have. My throat tightened. I brushed his hair back and forced a smile. "Yeah, someday, but not for a long, long time." He kept looking at me, his expression oddly serious. Then he nodded once. "Good." I froze. "What?" "Good," he said again, turning toward the drawer to grab a spoon. He didn't even look back at me. I stood there for a second, pulse thudding in my ears. I told myself it was just a weird kid thing. Kids say creepy stuff all the time. But there was no humor in his tone, no grin, just flat, matter-of-fact words that lingered in the air. That night after Ben came home, I told him about it. He laughed. "You're overthinking it, Liv. He's 4. He doesn't understand what he's saying." "Yeah, maybe," I said, but something about the way Jack had looked at me stuck in my chest. The next morning, I woke up and found him standing beside my bed. I hadn't heard him come in, he was just there. His little face hovered inches from mine. "Mommy," he whispered, voice small but steady. "Can I see what you look like when you're dead?" My stomach dropped. "What?" He tilted his head. "I want to see if you look like Sunny. Maybe if you lay really still and close your eyes." I sat up fast, heart pounding. "Jack, that's not funny." He blinked, expression blank. "I'm not joking. Go back to bed." He didn't move. "When you die, can I keep your eyes?" My voice came out sharper than I meant. "Jack, stop it. Right now." He flinched just a little, then turned and padded quietly out of the room. I sat there shaking. My hands actually trembled. Later that day, I told Ben again. He just shrugged. "He's just curious, Liv. Don't make it a big deal." But it didn't feel like curiosity. Not to me. "He's learning about death." "You're making it weird," that's what Ben said. Maybe I was. Maybe I was being dramatic until things got worse. A few nights later, I was in the kitchen doing dishes, the clink of plates and running water filling the quiet, when I heard the boys whispering in their room. Eli's little giggles floated through the hall, but Jack's voice was low, deliberate, too steady for play. I paused, drying my hands on a dish towel, and leaned closer to the doorway. "No, not yet," Jack was saying. "Mommy's not ready." My heart gave a slow, uneasy thud. "What's not ready, sweetie?" I called. The whispering stopped. I stepped into the hall. They both froze. Eli clutching his stuffed bear to his chest, eyes wide. Jack turned toward me slowly, his face half lost in shadow. "The hole," he said softly. I blinked. "What hole?" "The one under the house." "What one under the house?" I tried to smile like this was a game. "The one I made," he said simply. I let out a nervous laugh. "There's no hole under the house, baby." "Yes, there is." His tone didn't change. "You can't see it 'cause it's for after." "After what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. He didn't answer. He just smiled, a tight, strange little smile that made my chest ache with something I didn't understand. That night after they were asleep, I went outside with a flashlight. The air was cool, damp with the smell of dirt and grass. I crouched by the crawlspace, heart hammering. The house was old, the kind that creaked when the wind blew, and I told myself I was being ridiculous. But when I shone the light under the foundation, my stomach turned. There was a small pile of dirt, freshly dug. I didn't sleep that night. Over the next week, Jack changed. He'd sit in the living room staring at the wall for long stretches, lips moving like he was whispering to someone. Other times he'd draw, dark scribbles of red and black, stick figures lying on their sides. "What are you drawing, buddy?" I asked once, kneeling beside him. "They're for practice," he said without looking up. "For what?" "For when you go away." The words slid under my skin. I tried to take the crayons, but he screamed, this deep guttural sound that didn't belong in a child's throat. Not a tantrum, anger, real adult anger. That night, Eli came running into our room crying, shaking so hard his little teeth chattered. "Jack said he's gonna make me sleep forever," he sobbed. Ben finally lost it. He stormed into their room, voice booming. "Jack, what the hell's gotten into you?" Jack didn't flinch. He just looked up at him and said calmly, "You should be nicer. You're next." After that, Ben didn't sleep much either. He started locking their door from the outside at night. I hated it, it felt cruel. But then I found the dead bird in the kitchen sink, its head missing, and I understood. Jack just looked at me and said, "I wanted to see how it worked inside." We took him to a child psychologist. She was kind, measured, professional. "He's bright," she said. "Maybe too bright. He's testing boundaries, processing life and death." But no amount of therapy could explain the things that kept happening. One night around 3 a.m., I woke to the soft hiss of the baby monitor. Then I heard Jack's voice, calm, close. "Don't worry, Mommy, I'll take care of it when you're done sleeping." My blood ran cold. The monitor wasn't even in my room anymore, it was in his. I crept down the hallway, every floorboard betraying me. The boys' door was open. Both of them stood in the middle of the room, Jack holding Eli's hand, whispering something into his ear. When he saw me, he smiled. "It's okay, Mommy," he said. I made the hole bigger. That was it. I grabbed both kids, didn't even pack a bag, and drove to my sister's house at 2:30 in the morning. Ben came the next day, furious. "You can't just run off in the middle of the night." He's our son. But even he couldn't explain the whispering, or the drawings, or the hole. We moved 2 months later. New house, new school, new everything. For a while, Jack seemed better, calmer. I thought maybe we were in the clear, until last week. I was folding laundry in the living room when I felt him behind me. I hadn't even heard him come in. "Hey, Mommy," he said softly. "Yeah, honey?" He smiled, that same empty little smile. "You remember Sonny?" "Of course I do." His eyes brightened. "I figured it out. When people die, they go in the hole, right?" My stomach turned. "Jack, I think you're ready now," he said, voice barely above a whisper. Then he walked away, humming. Last night, I found dirt on the kitchen floor, a thin trail leading to the back door. I went outside with the flashlight again. The ground beneath the porch was dug up deeper this time, and there, half buried in the dirt, was one of Eli's stuffed animals, its head neatly torn off. I'm writing this in my car right now. The boys are asleep in the back seat. I told them we're going to Grandma's house. But when I looked in the rearview mirror just now, Jack was staring at me through the darkness, his eyes wide, unblinking, and he whispered something I could barely hear. "It's okay. Mommy, I'll help you when it's time." I don't know if I should keep driving, or finally stop and look at what's in that hole. I grew up in a church-going family in upstate New York. Sundays weren't optional, they were law. Rain or shine, flu or fever, the Parkers were lined up in our usual pew by 10:30 a.m. sharp. My dad, Richard, wore the same navy blazer every week, the one with the faint shine on the elbows. His white shirt was always pressed to perfection, red tie knotted so tight it looked like it was choking him. My mom, Linda, sat beside him with her Bible balanced neatly on her lap, offering those polite little smiles to the neighbors and softly humming along with the organ. My sister Emily and I would squirm in our stiff clothes, whispering jokes until Dad shot us that look, the one that could stop a laugh in your throat mid-breath. It wasn't a bad childhood. Honestly, most people would have called it blessed. Dad was a vice president at a mid-tier software company in Albany. The dot-com boom had treated him like royalty. He'd cashed out his stock options at the perfect time, which meant we grew up in a big colonial-style house with a wide green yard and 2 shiny cars in the driveway. We weren't rich, but we never needed anything. Mom didn't have to work, not in the paycheck sense, but she worked plenty. She was the orbit that kept our little world spinning. She woke at 6 every morning, humming as she packed our lunches, each one with a folded napkin and a note that said something like, "Have courage" or "Be kind." She baked cookies every Friday, strung garlands every Christmas, carved pumpkins that actually looked like the pictures in magazines. She never missed a recital, a soccer game, or a sick day. My friends would always say, "Man, I wish my mom was like yours," and I believed them. I believed we had it good, and for the most part we did. The only thing that didn't fit the picture was Dad. Not that he was violent or drunk or cruel in the obvious ways. No, he was worse in subtle ways, cold, precise, distant, like a machine trying to imitate a father. His shoes gleamed even when he wasn't going out. His shirts were so crisp they could probably cut you. His home office looked like a catalog photo, every pen aligned, every surface immaculate. He'd correct your grammar mid-sentence, scold you for chewing too loud, and if you dared laugh in church, that was it. The stare, the quiet, tight-lipped fury that froze you in place. You learned fast to behave. It wasn't until my late teens that everything cracked open. The day the truth came out about him, it was like the air left our house. Dad had been involved in things none of us could have imagined. I still don't like to say what, there's no point dragging it up. But the morning the cops came, the sirens and flashing lights turned our quiet street into a circus. The story hit every paper in Albany. Reporters parked outside. Neighbors whispered over their fences. The betrayal felt radioactive, burning through everything we thought we knew. I was numb. Emily cried for days. And Mom, God, Mom, she tried to keep us standing. She divorced him, quietly, cleanly, like she was cutting out a tumor. The settlement was huge, enough to make sure we'd never struggle for money again. But that didn't fix the rot underneath. She sold the big house and moved us into a small 2-bedroom bungalow on the edge of town. It was cozy, yes, but it felt smaller than its walls. The air inside was heavier somehow. Years went by. By the time I hit 30, I'd moved into my own place across town. Emily still lived with Mom, taking a gap year after high school, working part-time at a coffee shop, trying to figure out what to do next. I thought they were managing fine, until the calls started. One night my phone buzzed past midnight. Emily's name. "Alex," she whispered, her voice thin. "She's losing it." I rubbed my eyes. "What are you talking about?" She just screamed at me because I said I was thinking of moving out. "Well, it's a small house," I said, trying to sound reasonable. "No, Alex, you don't get it." Her breath hitched. She called me a selfish little, Mom, our mom. I sat up, heart pounding now. "What? No way. Mom doesn't swear." But Emily didn't laugh. She didn't say she was kidding. The silence that followed felt thick and strange, like the air before a storm. "I'm telling you she did," Emily insisted. She looked me right in the eye and said it. I didn't even know what to say. The harshest thing I'd ever heard our mom say was, "Dang it." The idea of her spitting venom at Emily didn't make sense. It felt like trying to picture snow in July. "Maybe she's just stressed," I said weakly, though even I didn't buy it. Stress doesn't make you call your daughter a gaze, Alex, she snapped, voice trembling. I let it go, convincing myself it was just tension from being stuck together in that little house. But Emily was right. That was the first crack in the illusion. The first time I realized something was starting to slip. Weeks later, the phone call came that changed everything. It was a perfect June afternoon. Melissa, my girlfriend back then, and I were walking through Five Rivers Nature Preserve. Birds chirped, sunlight dripped through the canopy, her fingers laced with mine. I remember the smell of pine and the sound of the stream in the distance, peaceful. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. Private number, Melissa said. Spam. Don't answer. But something in my gut told me to. I pressed it to my ear. Hello? Is this Alex Parker? A man's voice asked. Yeah. This is Officer Jameson with the Albany Police Department. I'm calling regarding your mother, Linda Parker. My stomach dropped. What happened? She was arrested earlier today for assault. I laughed reflexively. No, you've got the wrong person. My mom doesn't. She broke another woman's arm during an altercation, he continued evenly. When we attempted to detain her, she assaulted one of our officers. I froze. My mind refused the words like they were in another language. No, that's not possible. My mom doesn't even. He calmly listed her name, address, date of birth, every detail correct. What do I do? I finally stammered. Do I call a lawyer? Bail? Sir, he said, your mother has been remanded under the New York State mental hygiene law. She's being transferred to a secure psychiatric facility for evaluation. Bail does not apply. The world tilted. I sat hard on a nearby bench, the wood pressing cold into my legs. Melissa rubbed my back as I tried to catch my breath, but everything felt unreal, like I was underwater. That was the moment everything shifted. A week later, the hospital let her call. Alex, came her voice, steady, almost serene. Mom, oh my God, are you okay? Do you need anything? I've been so worried. I need you to do something for me, she said softly. Anything. Find the cop who arrested me. Officer Jameson. Badge number 437, spit in his face for disrespecting your mother. My heart stuttered. Mom, what are you? Her voice snapped, sudden and vicious. Spit on him. The shriek tore through the phone, high and sharp enough to make me yank it away from my ear. I'd never heard her scream like that, not even close. Mom, please calm down, I pleaded, but all I got in return was the click of disconnection. The first visit after that was worse. The hospital smelled like bleach and something hollow, like despair soaked into the walls. Doors buzzed open and shut. Nurses moved fast, avoiding eye contact. My chest tightened with every step down the corridor. When Emily and I entered Mom's room, she was sitting on the edge of her bed, hands folded neatly, eyes downcast. For a moment I thought maybe the staff had exaggerated, that she was still in there somewhere. Then she looked up. You didn't do it, she hissed. I blinked. Didn't do what? You didn't spit on him. You're weak, just like your father. Mom, please. She lunged. Emily screamed. The door burst open and 2 orderlies rushed in, pinning her down as she thrashed and spat. Her face twisted with rage I'd never seen before. She wasn't my mother in that moment. She was something else, something wild and broken. The months that followed were brutal. Emily and I leaned on each other, showing up to meetings with doctors, listening to words like acute psychotic break and prolonged stress response. They said years of pressure, Dad's arrest, the shame, the isolation had built up until something in her just snapped. The prescription, medication, therapy, patience. It was a long, aching climb. Some days she was lucid, soft-spoken, gentle, her eyes familiar. Other days she was bitter and cruel, spitting hateful words that didn't sound like her at all. But slowly, painfully slowly, she began to return. One afternoon, nearly a year later, I visited her and she smiled at me. A real smile, the kind that used to light up the kitchen when she pulled cookies out of the oven. I broke down right there, crying like a kid. She'll never be exactly the same. None of us will. But she came back. And that's the part that still chills me to my core. Because mental illness doesn't arrive wearing a mask. It hides behind the people you love most, waiting, patient. And when it finally shows its face, you realize the monster isn't in the dark. It's in the mirror wearing your mother's smile. I grew up in a small Northern California town in the early 1980s. It looked harmless enough. Quiet streets, trimmed lawns, the low hum of sprinklers in the evenings. But beneath that sleepy calm were people who either felt like extended family or made your stomach twist for reasons you couldn't name. I was only 3 years old when all of this began. At that age, danger doesn't exist yet. Evil is just a word adults whisper. Your world is built from laughter, the warmth of your mother's arms, the bright taste of juice boxes, and the sharp sting when she scolds you for running too far into the street. But my mother, she knew better. Before I was born, she worked for the sheriff's department taking statements, sitting across from men and women who'd done things most people couldn't even bring themselves to picture. She had this sixth sense about people, something deep and wordless. When someone's smile didn't reach their eyes, when a tone carried too much sweetness, she caught it. That instinct, she always said later, saved me. We lived on a dead-end street in one of those modest neighborhoods where every front yard had bald patches of dirt and dandelions, and where Saturday mornings meant men with grease-stained hands working under open garage doors, while their wives hosed down driveways. The kind of place where kids' laughter filled the air until the streetlights blinked on like fireflies. Across the street lived the Barlows, Mr. and Mrs. Barlow. They'd been there longer than anyone else. Mrs. Barlow was short and round with skin like worn parchment and a syrupy drawl that sounded more Oklahoma than California. She adored her animals. And when I say adored, I mean she lived among them. Cats sprawled across her porch railings under the hood of her dented Ford, even on the roof, tails flicking like lazy metronomes. Behind the house, rows of cages shimmered in the sun, parakeets, finches, and strangely quail that made soft clicking sounds when startled. When she cleaned their cages, the air filled with the sour mix of seed, feathers, and ammonia. Mom would catch the smell drifting through our kitchen window and mutter half to herself, "Lord, that woman needs a stronger stomach." Mr. Barlow was the opposite, tall, bony, always in faded jeans cinched too tight with a worn leather belt. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his voice had an edge that made even casual hellos sound rehearsed. What unsettled my mother, though, was the way he looked. He never smiled properly, just stared like he was trying to read something under your skin. To my 3-year-old self, he was just another grown-up, another name Mom mentioned when she reminded me not to wander. But to her, he was a red flag with a pulse. She never explained exactly why. Maybe it was his eyes. Maybe the way he'd linger too long when passing our yard. Whatever it was, she never let her guard down. I remember standing barefoot at the edge of our driveway, watching Mrs. Barlow scatter birdseed while her cats wove between her ankles like smoke. The finches fluttered in bursts of yellow, and the quail made funny bobbing movements that made me giggle. "Mom, can I go see them?" I'd beg, tugging at her hand. She'd glance over, lips pressed tight, eyes flicking toward the Barlow house. "Not with him there," she'd say, voice low but firm. "You can wave from here, baby." Sometimes, when Mr. Barlow's truck was gone and she deemed it safe, she'd let me cross the street. I can still feel the heat of the asphalt under my little sneakers, the sticky sweetness of a melting popsicle dripping down my wrist. Inside their house, the air was heavy, an odd mix of cat litter, bird dander, and the faint smell of something sour that clung to the curtains. Mrs. Barlow would fuss over me, her soft drawl wrapping around every word as she handed me a cookie. "How's your mama, sugar?" she'd ask, smiling with 2 red lips. But the moment the door creaked open and Mr. Barlow stepped inside, everything shifted. My mother's posture would change. Her smile gone, her voice sharp, steady, commanding. The kind of tone that meant she was ready for whatever she thought might come next. "Time to come back, honey," Mom would call, her tone sharp enough to slice through the air. There was no room for argument in her voice, just finality. "But I want to see the birds," I'd whine, my popsicle-stained fingers curling at my sides. "Not now. Come on." That was the end of it every time. Her instincts never wavered, not once. The memory that still makes my stomach twist came a few months later. I was sitting on the front steps playing with a chipped plastic truck when Mr. Barlow wandered over. His hands were shoved deep into his jeans pockets, his long legs bending as he crouched down until his face was only inches from mine. I remember the way his breath smelled, something sour like coffee and cigarettes. "You can come on back with me," he said in this soft, coaxing tone, as if he were sharing a secret. "I got something neat to show you." Before my little brain even registered what he'd said, my mother's voice tore across the yard like a whip. "She's not going anywhere with you." "Bill!" Her footsteps were quick, heavy. The next thing I knew, her fingers clamped around my arm, pulling me up and away. She didn't yell at me, but her grip was iron. I could feel the tension humming through her body, the way her jaw tightened as she turned me toward the house. Her heart was pounding so hard I swear I could feel it in my bones. That night, after she thought I was asleep, I heard her talking to my dad in the kitchen. Her voice was low but fierce. "I don't like the way he looks at her," she said. "I don't like it one damn bit." Not every neighbor made her feel that way. Down the street lived Mrs. Hill, a single mom with 2 wild boys who always had skinned knees and sticky faces. I didn't know until years later that their dad had left after coming out as gay. Then there was Miss Jean, who owned a big black lab that slobbered all over me while she laughed and apologized through her dentures. And Miss Patty, her yard was an explosion of color, a garden so lush and full it looked like it belonged on a postcard. But the Barlow house, that was different. It had rules. You don't go past the driveway, you don't follow him anywhere. If I say come back, you come back. No questions. At 3 years old, I thought she was just being mean, unfair even. But she was drawing a line between me and something far worse. There was another girl back then, Marcy. She lived a few blocks over with her mom and aunt. Her mom was big, missing most of her teeth and always seemed half asleep, a cigarette burning down to ash between her fingers. Marcy was sweet, a little shy, always wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. One afternoon, while we were sitting in the dirt making mud pies, she said it without thinking, the way kids say anything that passes through their heads. "My mom lets me go over to Mr. Barlow's. He gives me candy." I remember just nodding, not understanding why my mother's rule suddenly echoed in my mind like thunder. Back then it didn't seem strange. Grown-ups gave kids candy all the time, right? But years later, when Mom told me what she'd suspected, my stomach dropped, because that was exactly what he did. I didn't understand until I was grown. We were driving past our old neighborhood one day, the houses smaller than I remembered, the trees taller. I asked, almost without thinking, "Whatever happened to Mr. Barlow?" Mom's hands froze on the steering wheel. Her knuckles went white. She kept her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "He died," she said finally, voice flat. "And it's just as well. He was a bad man," I pressed, the way kids always do. "Bad how?" She didn't look at me. Her jaw flexed once before she answered. "Bad in a way you don't need to understand yet. Just know I never trusted him around you, and I was right not to." It wasn't until I was much older that the pieces fit, that I learned the whispers were true, that he'd been accused quietly of hurting children, that after his wife divorced him, Marcy's mom had let him move in with them, and that he'd kept doing what he'd always done. Marcy never got a happy ending. I think about her often, the little girl with tangled hair and a nervous laugh who deserved better. I remember how after one summer she stopped smiling the same way, like something inside her had gone quiet. Looking back now, I realize how easily it could have been me, if Mom hadn't had that instinct, if she hadn't yanked me back every time his shadow stretched too close. She wasn't perfect. God, she could be harsh, strict enough to make me cry sometimes. But when it mattered most, she was the wall between me and the monster hiding in plain sight. Evil doesn't always wear fangs or hide in the dark. Sometimes it looks like the quiet man across the street, holding a pocket full of candy and a smile that never, ever reaches his eyes. I never thought one ordinary evening could change the way I saw my wife, how I saw motherhood, even myself. We lived in a quiet mid-sized town in northern Indiana, the kind of place where porch lights stayed on for the neighbors, and every grocery clerk knew your name. Our house was a small 2-bedroom ranch near the edge of a wooded street. Warm, lived in, full of laughter most days and arguments on the others. My name's Caleb Morris, I'm 33, and I work nights at an auto parts warehouse running deliveries, managing inventory. My wife Tessa stayed home with our two girls, Lily, 6, and Ava, just 6 months old back then. We'd been struggling, not financially exactly, but emotionally. Ever since Ava's birth, something in Tessa had dimmed. The spark she had, the humor, the patience, it had all drained away. I told myself it was exhaustion, postpartum stress, the usual. But there were days she'd just stare off into space like she wasn't even in the room. That night started so normal, heartbreakingly normal. Around 7, I came home from a long shift, my back aching, clothes smelling faintly of motor oil. Tessa sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, her face blank. Lily was sprawled on the carpet watching cartoons, and Ava cooed softly in her bouncer. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "Smells like takeout night." Tessa didn't look up. "Didn't feel like cooking," she murmured. "There's leftover Thai in the fridge?" I nodded, kissed the top of Lily's head. "You been good for Mom today?" Lily grinned. "Mom said I could have a popsicle before dinner." I glanced at Tessa. She raised her eyes at last, her voice flat. "It's just one popsicle, Caleb, she's fine." That was how it always went, small frictions, quiet, sharp. I let it slide. I heated some noodles, sat down with Ava in my lap, rocking her gently as she kicked and gurgled. Lily sat beside me, unwrapping her bright red popsicle, humming to a jingle from the TV. Then she spotted a lemon on the counter. "Daddy, can I have some lemon?" "You're gonna eat that with your popsicle?" I chuckled. "You'll regret it." Before I could stop her, she licked it, puckering up dramatically. "It's sour," she squealed, laughing. Tessa's head snapped up, voice sharp. "Lily, don't eat that." "It's fine, Tess," I said gently. "She's just—" "No," she cut in. "I told you I don't want her eating that." The tone froze me. Lily's face crumpled. "Sorry, Mommy." "Hey, it's okay," I said softly. "Let's just get you some water, huh?" Lily frowned. "I want milk." "Milk after lemon, sweetheart. That'll upset your tummy." "Please," she begged. Tessa's voice went cold. "Fine, let her learn." I hesitated, then poured a small cup. Lily drank it down fast, smiling, then her smile broke. "Daddy," she whispered, clutching her stomach, "my tummy hurts." I set Ava in her carrier. Hey, it's okay." "Just breathe." And then she vomited, violently, all over my shirt, my lap, the couch cushions. The smell hit me hard. I jumped to my feet on instinct, trying to lift her away, and that's when I realized what I'd done. Ava, who'd been on my lap seconds before, slipped as I stood. There was a dull thunk, then a sharp cry. My blood ran cold. Oh God, Ava!" I dropped to my knees, heart slamming against my ribs. She was wailing. I lifted her, and there it was, blood pooling near her eye, spreading fast, bright red on her tiny face. "Tessa, get the keys, now!" I screamed. She didn't move. She just sat there staring. "Tessa!" I yelled again, voice cracking. Her eyes drifted toward me, slow, unfocused. "You dropped her. It was an accident. She's bleeding, for God's sake, move." Finally, she stood. The chair screeched against the tile. We rushed to the car. Ava's cries tore through the air as I strapped her in, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the buckle. The drive was chaos. Lily sobbed in the back seat, terrified. Tessa sat stone-faced in the passenger seat, holding Ava close but saying nothing. "Talk to me," I snapped. "Is she still bleeding?" Tessa looked down, then whispered, "You don't deserve to hold her again." "What?" My voice cracked. "What the hell are you talking about?" "You dropped our baby, Caleb," she said, her tone icy, detached. "You dropped her." I wanted to scream, to argue, but panic drowned everything else out. The drive to the ER blurred, sirens in my chest, Tessa silent beside me. The nurse whisked Ava into triage, and I stood there, useless, my hands shaking. The blood had looked so much worse than it was, a small cut just above her eye, the red pooling downward so it seemed like she was crying blood. When the doctor said she was fine, just needed a few stitches, my knees almost buckled. I let out a weak laugh, half relief, half disbelief. "She's okay," I said, smiling toward Tessa, waiting for her to meet me halfway, for some sign that we were in this together. But she didn't smile. She didn't even look at me. On the way home, the silence was suffocating. Lily had fallen asleep, her head against the window, thumb still in her mouth. I kept glancing at Tessa. The dashboard light washed her face pale, jaw tight as stone. "I'm sorry," I said finally. "I panicked, You panicked," she echoed flatly, and she paid for it. "That's not fair, Tess. I was holding both of them. She threw up on me," I reacted. "You always react," she snapped. "You never think." That one cut deep. We pulled into the driveway. Before I could kill the engine, she turned to me, eyes red but voice eerily calm. "I think you should sleep on the couch tonight." "You serious?" I asked. "I don't want you near her right now." The words stung, but exhaustion swallowed my anger. I just nodded and went inside. That was the night everything truly shifted. In the days after, Tessa grew distant in a new way. Cold, methodical. She moved through the house like a ghost, tending to Ava with mechanical care but never looking at me. When I tried to help, she'd murmur, "I've got it." One evening, I came home early. She was standing over Ava's crib, staring down, whispering something too low to hear. "Tess?" She jerked upright, startled. "Don't sneak up on me like that." "What were you saying?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "Just humming to her." But she wasn't humming. I know what humming sounds like. Then the other thing started. The baby monitor would click on by itself. Sometimes in the middle of the night I'd hear whispering through it. Soft, rhythmic, too faint to make out. I'd look at Tessa beside me, eyes closed, her breathing slow. But sometimes I wondered if she was really asleep. The whispering always stopped when I checked. And the next day I'd find her in Ava's room again, murmuring, "You don't need him. Mommy keeps you safe." At first I thought I was losing my mind, until Lily started saying things. "Mommy told me Daddy makes bad choices," she said one morning, spooning cereal, milk dripping off her chin. I froze. "When did she say that?" "Last night," Lily said. "She said if Daddy hurts Ava again, we might have to go away." That evening, I confronted Tessa. I tried to sound calm. "Why are you saying stuff like that to Lily?" She blinked at me, all innocence. "What are you talking about?" "You told her I hurt the baby." "Well, didn't you?" She said sharply, deliberate. "It was an accident, Tessa." Her face barely moved. Accidents happen when people aren't careful. Something in her eyes twisted my stomach. It wasn't anger, it was certainty. Like she'd already decided what I was. Weeks crawled by. The tension thickened, soured. I barely slept, afraid to leave Ava alone with her. But I had no proof of anything. Not yet. Then one night I woke to a faint scraping sound. Something being dragged. I slipped out of bed, every nerve on edge, and followed it down the hall. Ava's door was open, light spilling through. Tessa stood over the crib, her hand resting on the rail. Ava was awake, whimpering softly. "Tessa," I whispered. She didn't move. "What are you doing?" She turned her head slowly, her face ghostly in the nursery light. "She almost stopped breathing," she said quietly. "When you dropped her that night, did you know that?" My heart pounded. "That's not true. She never stopped breathing." "She almost did," she insisted. "And you didn't even notice. I had to save her." "Tessa, that's not what happened. Please." Her head tilted. "You shouldn't be here." "What?" "She doesn't sleep well when you're here. She senses it." "What the hell are you talking about?" I took a step forward. She knows. I froze. Her hand hovered just above Ava's face, thumb pressing lightly beneath the baby's nose. I lunged, shoving her back. "What the hell are you doing?" Tessa stumbled against the wall, eyes blazing. "I was checking her breathing." "You were checking her breathing?" I shouted. Ava started to wail. I scooped her up, backing away, my whole body shaking. "You need help," I said. "You need serious help." Her voice dropped, cold and low. "You're the one who needs help, Caleb. You're the dangerous one." The next day, she took the kids and left for her sisters. That was 3 months ago. Now I only see my daughters on weekends, supervised visits. Tessa filed for separation, told the court I was unfit. They believed her. Sometimes at night I still hear the faint click of the monitor, the phantom whispers. I tell myself it's all in my head. But when I pick Ava up and she flinches just for a second, and when Lily asks why Mommy says I almost killed her sister, I freeze. I tell her it isn't true, that Daddy loves them more than anything. But when I see Tessa at drop-offs, calm, composed, that faint, satisfied smile. I start to wonder. Maybe the real danger wasn't what happened that night,
Maybe it's what she believes now.
because she's convinced herself I'm the monster. And maybe that's all it takes to become one. I used to think all moms were like mine. I really did. When you're a kid, you don't have a comparison. You just assume what happens in your house happens in everyone else's. The sharp tongue, the sudden mood swings, the way she could go from screaming at me to demanding a hug seconds later. It all seemed normal. But as I got older, I started noticing things. The way my friends' moms smiled when they picked them up from school. How they tucked notes into lunch bags or clapped too loudly at school plays. They made being loved look easy. That's when I realized something in our house wasn't right. My mother, Lorraine, wasn't like the others. She was different in the kind of way that made you lower your voice when talking about her. We lived in a sagging neighborhood in upstate New York, the kind where the houses leaned a little too much to one side, paint peeling like sunburned skin. At night, dogs barked from chain-link yards, men argued over football with beer bottles in hand, and the air always smelled faintly of grease and cigarettes. It wasn't pretty, but it was home. Our own house looked ordinary enough from the street, faded blue paint, 2 missing steps on the porch, windows clouded from years of cooking oil. But once you crossed the threshold, it was like stepping into a storm that never passed. Lorraine didn't just want order. She wanted devotion. Every look, every word had to orbit around her moods. If you made her laugh, you were safe for a while. If you contradicted her or, God forbid, made her look small in front of someone, you'd better brace yourself. Don't look at me like that, she'd snap, cigarette trembling between her fingers. You think you're better than me, huh? You little smartass, I learned fast. By 11, I knew survival meant staying quiet, staying useful and disappearing whenever I could. Then came February of 2009. A Tuesday afternoon, gray and bruised, the kind of sky that looks like it's about to snow even when the weatherman swears it won't. I remember the cold sting on my face as I walked home, backpack straps digging into my shoulders. Normally it took 8 minutes, 10 if I dragged my feet. But that day I never really made it home, not in the way I should have. When I turned onto our street, I saw Rick, Mom's boyfriend, leaning against his rusted-out Chevy, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. His breath came out in white puffs, his eyes squinting like the light hurt him. "About time," he called, voice low and gravelly, like someone who'd spent years yelling. I froze. Rick wasn't supposed to be there. He always worked late, or at least that's what he told Mom. "Your mom's looking for you," he said, flicking ash onto the slush. "She's in a mood. Don't keep her waiting." My stomach tightened. When Lorraine was in a mood, it meant shouting, maybe a glass thrown, doors slammed until the frames cracked. I nodded, muttered okay, and climbed the porch steps, each one creaking under my sneakers. The salt crunched beneath me as I pushed the door open. Inside, the air was stale. Cigarette smoke, fried food, and something sour that lingered in the curtains. The only light came from the TV, flickering low in the living room. Mom sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed tight, a cigarette burning down in the ashtray beside a half-empty glass of cheap wine. "You're late," she said, her tone flat but dangerous. I swallowed hard. "Only a couple minutes." Her eyes cut up to me, sharp as glass. "Don't sass me. You walk straight home, you hear? Straight. None of this hanging around with friends or wandering off. You think I don't know what you're up to?" "I didn't—" "Shut up," she snapped, her voice cracking like a whip. That was Lorraine in a nutshell. You couldn't win. No matter what you said, she'd find a way to twist it. I set my backpack down quietly and sat at the table, hoping she'd let it go. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, studying me with that long, unreadable look that made the back of my neck prickle. "You love me, don't you?" she asked suddenly. The question hit like a slap. I blinked at her, unsure how to respond. Of course I loved her, she was my mom, but something about the way she said it made my stomach turn. Her tone wasn't tender. It was testing. "Yeah," I said softly. Her mouth curved into a smile, but her eyes stayed cold. "Good, 'cause I got a plan and you're gonna help me." My fingers tightened on my jeans. "A plan? Nothing bad," she said quickly, waving a hand. "Just a little scheme to set us up right. I'm tired of living broke in this dump of a town. It's time we got what we deserve." I didn't say anything. The cigarette smoke curled around her head like a halo, and she smiled wider. People are suckers for a sad story, she went on. You'll see. They eat that shit up, and all you gotta do is play along. I frowned. Play along with what? She grinned then, a real grin, wide and wild. You're gonna go missing. The words made my brain stall. What? Not for real, she said, rolling her eyes like I was being dramatic. Just for a little while. Long enough to get people talking, to get the cops involved, to get reward money rolling in. We'll be famous. Maybe even get a book deal. And when the money comes, we split it 50-50. You'll thank me someday. I stared at her, my chest tight. I don't want to, I whispered. Her face changed in an instant. The light in her eyes snapped out. Don't want to? She hissed, leaning forward. After everything I do for you? You ungrateful little brat. She slammed her hand on the table and the ashtray jumped, scattering gray dust. You'll do what I say. End of story. I wanted to argue, to tell her it was wrong, but I'd learned the hard way that defiance only made things worse. So I nodded. And that's how it started, my nightmare dressed as her plan. The next afternoon, she sent me off to school like everything was normal. She even packed my lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, which she never did. I remember thinking maybe she'd changed her mind. But when the final bell rang, I saw Rick waiting outside the gate, leaning against his car with that greasy grin. Your mom said I'm supposed to give you a ride, he said, his teeth yellow when he smiled. My heart sank. Every instinct screamed not to get in that car, but I knew what happened when I disobeyed. So I climbed in, buckled my seatbelt, and stared out the window. He didn't take me home. Instead, he drove to the far side of town, past the main streets and into the industrial outskirts where houses turned into junkyards and half-burned duplexes. He pulled up to one of them, a 2-story wreck with boarded windows and overgrown weeds curling around the porch. Just hang out here a while, he said, unlocking the door. The smell of mildew and rot hit me instantly. Your mom will explain later. And then he locked me in. The first night I sat on a stained mattress in the back room, knees pulled to my chest, trying not to cry loud enough for anyone outside to hear. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips, and every creak of the floorboards made my heart race. By the second day, I realized this wasn't going to end soon. Lorraine finally showed up that afternoon, carrying a greasy paper bag. She handed it to me like everything was fine. You're safe here, she said, setting down the fries and soda. Don't make a fuss. People will be out there looking for you soon. You just sit tight. Why can't I go home? I asked, voice trembling. She shot me a sharp look. Because that's not how the plan works. Don't you want us to be rich? Don't you want a better life? I shook my head, tears slipping down my face. Her expression hardened. You'll thank me later, she muttered, turning toward the door. The lock clicked behind her. Outside, the world lost its mind. Flyers with my school photo were stapled to telephone poles. Neighbors formed search parties. The local news ran my picture every night under bold white letters, missing girl, age 11. And Lorraine, God, she put on a show. On camera, she wept, clutching one of my old teddy bears. She begged for my safe return. She talked about how scared she was, how much she loved her baby girl. People believed every word. Donations poured in. Churches took collections. Strangers handed her money in grocery store parking lots. A local car dealership even posted a $10,000 reward. And all the while, I sat alone in that filthy room, the air thick with mildew, my stomach aching from hunger and fear, listening to the world mourn me like I was already dead. I was 8 years old the first time I realized something was deeply wrong with my mother. Not in any obvious way. She wasn't drunk or violent or even outwardly cruel. At least not in ways people could see. She was the kind of person who made you wonder if maybe the problem was you. It was in the little things, tones, glances, the way she'd tilt her head slightly and say, "Are you sure that's what happened?" And after I told her something she didn't like, she didn't need to yell or hit. She could make me feel small just by how she looked at me. She had this way of reshaping memories until I couldn't tell what was real anymore. We lived in a small blue house in rural Ohio, right off a quiet road surrounded by fields that smelled like mud and gasoline after it rained. My dad worked the late shift at the paper mill, so most nights it was just me and Mom. She'd sit in her recliner in the living room, chain-smoking menthols and watching her shows, barely glancing up when I walked by. But the night the toy box came home, everything changed. Dad pulled into the driveway in his old Ford, headlights cutting through the thin fog rolling in from the cornfields. I remember pressing my palms to the cold window, watching as he hauled this huge cardboard box out of the truck bed. It was taped up, scuffed, and looked like it had been sitting in someone's garage for years. When he came in, Mom was at the kitchen table, thumbing through a stack of bills. "Don't track mud in," she said without looking up. Dad set the box down beside her. "Got something for the kid?" he said with that tired grin he always had after a 12-hour shift. Yard sale over in Logan, they were practically giving this stuff away. I tore into the box before he even finished talking. Inside were old toys, plastic dinosaurs, wooden blocks, a couple of model cars, and one thing that caught me instantly. A small red fort made of heavy plastic, maybe from some medieval playset. "Sweet, right?" Dad said. "Figured you'd get a kick out of it." Mom finally looked up, her eyes flicking from me to the box. "We don't need more junk in this house," she said flatly. Dad shrugged. "He's a kid, Nancy, let him play." I didn't care what either of them said. That fort was mine. I remember the weight of it, the way the tiny drawbridge clicked when I lifted and dropped it. I played with it every day, setting it up on the living room carpet, building little armies out of my action figures, but I wasn't really playing alone. At first, I thought it was just imagination, the way kids invent voices for their toys. I'd talk to them, narrate battles, make up stories, and sometimes it almost felt like something or someone was answering. "Don't move him there," a faint, breathy voice said once. "He's supposed to guard the gate." The first time I heard it, I froze. It wasn't my dad's voice. It wasn't Mom's either. "Who said that?" I whispered, no answer. Just the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. That night, while brushing my teeth, Mom called me into the hallway. "Who were you talking to earlier?" she asked. I wasn't, just my toys." She stared hard, eyes sharp, searching my face. "Don't lie to me." "I'm not," I said quickly. "I was just pretending," she sighed, rubbing her temple. "You always were a weird kid," she muttered, walking away. The next few days, things got stranger. Toys started moving. I'd leave the fort arranged one way, then come back to find a figure standing on the roof. One I knew I hadn't put there. I told Mom, but she just gave me that thin, knowing smile. "Maybe you forgot," she said. "Kids do that." But I hadn't forgotten. One afternoon, I was lying on the carpet beside the fort when something cold brushed against my hand, like a fingertip. I jerked back, the plastic figure clattering to the floor. Then I heard it again, softer but close. "You shouldn't have my fort." The voice wasn't angry. It sounded sad. "Who are you?" I whispered, a pause. Then, I ran straight to the kitchen. Mom stood at the sink washing dishes. "Mom, there's a kid in the living room." She didn't even turn around. "Oh, stop it, Ben, there's no kid." I heard him. "Enough!" she snapped, slamming a plate down so hard it made me jump. Don't start making things up just to get attention. I wanted to tell her I wasn't lying, but one look at her face stopped me cold. That was the look she got before she said something that really hurt. Words that stayed longer than any bruise. That night, I couldn't sleep. Whispers drifted from the hallway, faint and hushed like a conversation just out of reach. "Please," a small voice said, then silence. When I woke up the next morning, the fort was gone. I ran to the living room. The box of toys was missing too. Mom sat at the table sipping her coffee. "Where's my fort?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Your dad threw that junk out. Why?" "Because I told him to." "You were getting obsessed." "I wasn't," I cried. "It was mine." She slammed her cup down, coffee splashing across the table. "Don't you dare raise your voice to me." I backed away, trembling. Something tightened in my chest, a sadness that didn't even feel like mine. After that day, Mom and Dad started fighting. Constantly. I didn't know it then, but later I'd learn it was about the toys. Mom wanted them gone. Said they gave her a bad feeling. Dad said I was just a kid and needed something to play with. But then one night he came home late, looking like he'd seen a ghost. His face was pale, his hands trembling as he fumbled with his keys. Mom looked up from the couch, cigarette hanging from her fingers. "What happened?" she asked. He just shook his head. "We can't keep that stuff," he muttered. "Not after what I heard." That was the last time he ever brought home anything from a garage sale. Years passed. By my 20s, Mom and I barely spoke. Dad had died of a heart attack when I was 16, and she'd moved into a small apartment in Columbus. I avoided her calls most of the time. When I did pick up, it was always the same. Guilt wrapped in casual conversation. How I never visited, how I didn't care about family anymore. Then one night she called me crying. I could count on one hand how many times I'd ever heard her cry. "Ben," she gasped between sobs, "I need to tell you something." About those toys. I blinked at the phone. "What toys?" I hadn't thought about them in years. She sniffled. "Your father lied to me. He said that box came from a yard sale, but he went back there later. He talked to the woman who was running it. She told him why everything was so cheap." Her voice quivered. "The family who lived there before? There was a murder. The husband shot his wife, her lover, and then their little boy, in his room, right next to where they found that toy box." For a moment I couldn't speak. The phone line buzzed softly in the silence. "That's why your father threw them out," she whispered. "He didn't want you playing with something that belonged to a dead kid." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, tell her ghosts weren't real. But something in her voice made me feel 8 years old again, standing in that dim living room hearing whispers no one else could. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, then took a shaky breath. "Because sometimes at night I hear him too." I sat up straight. "What?" "The boy," she whispered. "He says he wants his fort back." I didn't sleep that night. A few months later, Mom passed away in her sleep. Heart failure, they said. When I went to her apartment to pack her things, the silence felt unnatural. No smoke, no TV noise, just the low hum of the old refrigerator. In her closet on the top shelf, I found a cardboard box. I pulled it down and froze. Inside, wrapped carefully in a towel, was the red fort. It looked smaller than I remembered, faded and dusty, but still solid. I sat on the floor and brushed my fingers over the little drawbridge. It clicked open with that same sharp clack I'd never forgotten. Then I heard it. "Hi." I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. No one was there. My pulse hammered in my ears. "Who's there?" I whispered. Silence. Then faintly, "Can I have it back now?" I dropped the fort, stumbling backward. My breath came in quick bursts. The air felt thick, pressing in on me. I turned to leave, but stopped cold. The fort sat where I'd left it, and on the dusty roof were tiny fingerprints. I packed up the apartment as fast as I could. I didn't take the fort. I left it sitting there, drawbridge open like a mouth waiting to swallow whatever came next. That was 5 years ago. Now I have a daughter, Sophie. She's 7. She's got my eyes and my mom's stubborn streak. I promised myself I'd never be like her. Never cold, never manipulative. I'd let my kid laugh, play, be curious. Last week, my wife came home with a box of secondhand toys from a church sale. Sophie was thrilled, dumping them all over the living room floor. And right there, sitting in the middle of the pile, was a small red fort. I swear to God, my heart stopped. "Where'd you get this?" I asked. My wife smiled. "Some lady cleaning out her late mother's stuff. Why?" I couldn't answer. That night, Sophie set up the fort on the carpet just like I used to. She was whispering to herself, moving little figures around. Only, she wasn't talking to herself. When I passed her doorway, I heard her murmur, "I know. I'll guard the gate for you." I froze. "Sophie?" I said softly, stepping inside. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" She looked up at me, smiling innocently. "The boy who used to have this fort." My stomach dropped. "What boy?" She giggled. "He says his name is Alex." That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the hallway made my heart jump. Around 2 in the morning, I got up to check on her. Her door was half open. She was sitting up in bed, facing the corner. "Sweetie," I whispered. She didn't turn. "He's sad," she said softly. "He doesn't like that you threw his toys away." My throat went dry. "Sophie, who told you that?" Her shoulders trembled. "Alex did." Cold washed through me. I forced a shaky smile. "Okay, honey. Time to sleep, all right? We'll talk in the morning." She nodded, still facing the corner. "He says you can hear him too." I left the room, closing the door quietly behind me. I didn't sleep. In the morning, the fort was gone. Her other toys were scattered across the floor, but the fort vanished. I tore through the house, the living room, the kitchen, even the backyard. Nothing. When Sophie woke up, I asked what happened. She rubbed her eyes. "Alex took it," she said simply. He said it was time to go home. I stared at her. What does that mean? She smiled faintly. He said, you'll see. That night I sat alone in the living room trying to convince myself it was coincidence, that I was imagining things. Then I heard it, a faint click. The sound of a tiny plastic drawbridge lowering. It came from the hallway. When I turned toward Sophie's room, I saw it, a thin red glow spilling out from beneath her door. I didn't go in. I just sat there staring, heart pounding so hard it hurt. And in that moment I understood. My mother wasn't cruel because she lied. She was cruel because she knew. She'd seen the same thing I was seeing now, and instead of warning me, she buried it. Made me think I was insane. And now it had found my daughter. That was 2 nights ago. Sophie hasn't said much since. She sits by the window, humming quietly. Yesterday I heard her whispering again. It's okay, Alex, she said. Daddy says we can keep it this time. But I hadn't said that. I don't know what to do anymore. My wife thinks I'm exhausted, paranoid. But at night, when the house goes still, I hear it. Soft laughter echoing faintly down the hallway, like children playing somewhere just out of sight. And sometimes, when I pass Sophie's room, a small voice whispers from the dark, "Thanks for giving it back."